Right, so is this the final album?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're flying through these. Right, so do you want to introduce this one?
I shall. So, Bright Green Field by Squid, released on the 7th of May, 2021, obviously, under What Records. It contains 11 songs and is approximately 54 minutes and 46 seconds long, so just under an hour. It's the Brighton Quintet's debut album and follows the release of their first EP, Town Centre, which was released back in September 2019. We previously covered one of their singles, Broadcaster, as part of our single swap section way back in episode 10 of the Scratchcast podcast. And at the time, the band were very much picked to be the next best thing and ones to watch by various different media outlets, namely the likes of NME and The Guardian. And usually, when bands and their artists are kind of talked about in this fashion, it tends to get our hackles up a bit, and there's then this tendency for, I think, both of us to just shut off to them, to be honest. However, with regards to Broadcast, I think we both reviewed the single quite favourably. And although I think we agreed that perhaps the whole album of this type of thing might be a bit of a difficult, dense, almost impenetrable listen, I quite enjoyed this, if I'm honest.
I quite enjoyed it too, but I think it's too long.
Okay. I think it's about horses for courses, if I'm honest with you, Steads. I can see myself listening to this album again, like listening to it a lot. But I just don't think it's the type of album that you would sit down and listen to, if that makes sense. I think it's one that you would kind of like maybe float in and out of.
Yeah, I mean, I've written somewhere in my notes that if someone were to walk in while you were listening to this album, they'd think you were absolutely mental. Like they would
Yeah.
think you were an absolute mentalist because it is crazy. Like
It's a crazy box of tits album. Like it's nuts and off the wall. Like I think, when we were looking at Broadcaster previously, I think we described it as being quite avant-garde and out there. I've described that one song as a sprawling and psychotic nightmarish adventure. And I think you could just as easily apply that same description to a lot of the songs on this album as well. I remember you saying of that Broadcaster song as well that you kind of felt as if you felt your attention waning after a while, but there was the odd hook or stylistic change in the song that kind of helped kind of bring you back. And again, I think there's a lot of that in this album as well. We previously liked them to Black Midi, and there's a lot of similarities there. Like undoubtedly, there's a lot of similarities there.
definitely, there's a band called Black Country New Road who I'm not hugely familiar with, but they are of the same kind of ilk of what I've kind of described as art school indie rock.
Yeah,
Emphasis on the art school part, I suppose.
yeah.
But it's like like all of three of those bands, they're like it's kind of weird, jazzy, experimental music, lots of changes in pace and direction.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's loads of actually really brilliant and catchy moments as well. But I think the reason I say this is too long is because I think some of the songs, the gaps between the bits that I like are sometimes too long, and there's certain songs where you could actually condense it down into a much like shorter runtime and make it a better song.
Boy
On
Racers for me is one of those tracks. Like it's what 7 minutes and 34 seconds long, and for the most part, it's just like some pretty bassy synth electronic reverb, and that lasts for about 3 or 4 minutes.
yeah, yeah, it's like the first half is the song Boy Racers almost, and
Yeah,
then the
yeah,
second half is like white, like atmospheric soundscape, like sci-fi nightmare, which I quite like actually. I quite like that section. I suppose it's a bit like broadcaster in that kind of sense. But there are like you could almost make this album have a lot more songs because some of them could be split, or
mm-hmm.
you could just condense other songs to make them a bit shorter. There was one in particular that I kind of thought you could probably boil down to. Yeah, I think paddling. Like it's got pretty cool verse parts and like a good chorus section, and then it's just got these long drawn out bits that connect them, and I think you could almost squish it down from like 6 minutes to like just a fun 3 minute jam. So
Mm.
it does feel a little bit bloated, I would say. But like I said, there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, the first proper track, which is track two, GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, is really, really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Like, it's the bass line, the drums, it's got like a neo noir kind of smoky brass, like trumpet sound, like really groovy guitar licks, and like the sort of yelping, shouting vocal. It's quite startling, and it's a proper like jam at the same time. Now the the vocals, I really like them on GSK, but like you move into like the next song, like Narrator, and that yelp just starts to grate like a little bit, like and that happens various times throughout the album.
Yeah, I mean, I have said of GlaxoSmithKline, what is it? GSK,
GSK, GlaxoSmithKline.
GlaxoSmithKline. Sorry. Yeah, I've said of that song. I really enjoyed that song as well. I thought it was a real groove. But the lead singer Ollie Judge's vocals, I imagine that would be an immediate turn off for a lot of folk. Like I've likened them to the type of thing that you'd have probably heard from quite a few kind of post-punk bands from the 80s. Kind of reminded me a bit of kind of John Lydon's Public Image Limited. There's elements of kind of talking heads in there as well because he kind of talk sings, albeit kind of more manically at times than others.
It's a
But yeah,
feature of like crap indie bands as well, though, isn't it? Like this sort of yelping thing.
yeah, I suppose. What sort of thing are you thinking of? What sort of
I don't
bands?
know. I just think of the sort of generic like term like landfill indie. Like that
Aye.
makes you. I don't know. I can't give you any like specific like bands that I'm liking it to, but it just gives me that feeling of like crap indie. But I don't GSK. I think he gets away with it. I don't think it's that. I think it's good on GSK. I think it works because it's not. It never gets quite as high pitched on as it does on some of the other songs, which is when it grates a little bit with me.
Aye. It's funny you mentioned narrator, like it's and I think we actually said the same of Black Midi actually when we reviewed Black Midi. I can't even remember the name of the album now. It was like Schlagheim or something like that, wasn't it? So,
Schlagenheim, yeah.
was it? Is that what it was called? Something like that,
Schlagen,
wasn't
yeah.
it?
They've since released another album which I haven't really given a shot, but
No, I think I watched some of the promo stuff, but I haven't actually listened to the album yet. But I think we said of the vocals in that Black Midi album that the kind of vocalist almost uses his voice as an instrument in and of itself, and I would say the same is true of this album, and particularly on Squid. There's a point where you can hear stabbing, kind of shrieking guitars, and then his vocals almost mimic that to a point,
yeah,
and then that kind of melts away to the point where he just starts singing. Is it kind of B mine or play? No, play mine. Sorry, play mine,
yeah.
and
I'll
it
play
takes
my
on a
cards, something like that, isn't it?
yeah, but it's just like play mine, and it takes on a bit more of a kind of somber tone, certainly in terms of the vocal, his vocals. However, that's blanketed over the sound of this pretty mad and frenzied instrumentation, kind of warbling away in the background. That kind of ends with these kind of blood curdling screams from the featured female guest vocalist, Sky Murphy, which for my money kind of felt like a maniacal Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd.
There's a section like I mean, narrator's 8 minutes long, so there's a lot of
How
things
long
happening.
it is?
It's 8 minutes long, yeah. There's, there's a lot of stuff happens, and there's a section where those female vocals come in. It's almost like Je t'aime or something like a song like that. It's like whispered, like
Yeah.
soft. Like there's that whole section, but then there's that whole crazy like maniacal section you're talking about. The
Uh,
song starts off as like a typical like indie song as well. It's like goes through a lot of changes, but bloody hell is it long. And that I'll play mine part that goes on and on and on. And I mean, I mean, a less patient person might have turned that off, like because it goes on for so long. But you know, it's okay. And this is the song in particular that made me send you that clip from Spaced earlier. So the sort of scene where they go to visit Vulva, and you've got that crazy end to narrator is just like I'll splice the clip into the episode after I've spoken about it, but
Yeah.
that part is just Vulva. It's it's absolute nonsense, but kind of entertaining nonsense.
It's quite interesting though, because isn't there's a lot of kind of similar stuff on that Black Midi album as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is.
I don't just mean in terms of like me messing about with time signatures and that, but there's a lot of screaming on that album as well.
Yeah, and like bizarre vocals and stuff like that, and like weird, like long instrumental parts, like, and it goes through. It can be like really atmospheric and then really intense. Which I suppose it's like sort of that's the whole jazz thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite
Well,
experimental.
I think if you kind of look back and when these guys started and how they started, I think kind of they're all kind of schooled in modal jazz. And I don't know what I mean. I don't know what that means, but I know what jazz is. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's definitely elements of that in it.
I was listening to the song Peel Street, which has got
Mm.
like I quite like the start of that song. It's got like these like bleepy bloopy electronics that I've likened to like the inside of the TARDIS or something like that. And then like it hits a pretty cool groove when the drums and bass come in. The vocals put me off a little bit, but that groove is pretty good and it kind of layers up. But the song kind of changes into something else.
How would you
Well,
describe that section?
said I haven't really described it. What I have said is that I didn't, you know, the song could have ended at 2.5 minutes, like, and that would have been fine. And then I was thinking that as I was listening to that second part, and then the lyrics are like, "Well, I've always been told what to do, but now I'm free," and it felt like a bit of a fuck you, like directed right at me for thinking that at the time. Um, because I was basically thinking, right, I've had enough of this. And he's like, well, I've always been told what to do, but now I'm free. And it's like, yeah, okay, fair play.
Aye, I mean, I noticed that change in the song as well. And that it's almost like this kind of almost calypso kind of samba vibe to it. I don't know if I'm describing it correctly, but it's a major gear shift anyway
Yeah,
from the previous part of the song. But yeah, it has a kind of dark and kind of brooding atmospheric kind of feel to it as well. Aye. Quite a lot of strange kind of lyrical content throughout the course of the album, in particular like documentary filmmaker. So we're kind of going up the track listing from kind of Peel Street.
yeah,
Opens with this kind of really groovy, jazzy trombone section with kind of warbling electronics, which I enjoyed. And again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but like it is kind of the same as that Black Midi album. We said of that Black Midi album that there's loads of little bits where you'd like, I just wish they did maybe a bit more of that, less of this. I felt that of that song documentary filmmaker, because I really enjoyed the opening, but then it descends into more of that kind of pretty shouty, craze section about the differences in weather. Like, what was it? It was like it snowed in February. It snowed in February, but it was warm in the summer, or something like that.
it's the delivery as well. Again, this goes into vulva territory, where it's like he says it's warm in the summer but snowy in February. But it's the way he says the words and delivers them that kind of it's really bizarre. Um,
Again, I suppose using his voice as an instrument in and of itself. And then, giving us some pretty sound financial advice, whereby he tells us to buy our Easter eggs after Easter because it tends to be cheaper around about that time. Like, nice. I remember that.
yeah, but in the same time, he's talking about sweat dripping off his sheets and the sweat dripping down on
Plastic sheets
his
as well, and I was thinking, who the fuck
he's
sleeps
in,
with plastic sheets?
well, he's in a hospital ward, it says. Like, so he
Oh,
talks about the documentary filmmaker passing by on the hospital ward. So it's almost like he's in like an insane asylum and somebody's come in to like film the patients or something and he's observing it. And he is a lunatic, like in the asylum. That's kind of the vibe I got from it because it does sound like the ravings of a lunatic, especially that warm in the summer, snowy in February part, because he sounds like he's off his head when he sings that,
yeah, yeah,
like completely off his head.
aye.
And you know, if you can get into that, then you enjoy that quite a lot. And I do like some of those bits where it is completely mental, but there are other bits that it's just great a little bit.
Sneds, there was a lot of bits that I really got into. Like, I
Yeah,
really enjoyed some of the grooves on
yeah. Some of the
this
grooves,
album.
man.
Like, I remember like sitting writing my notes and fucking just rocking out to some of the bits.
Yeah, yeah. There are some really awesome bits like that, man. I would say GSK is definitely one of the highlights. Global Groove as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a good track.
that's brilliant. Those are the two standouts. Most of the other songs have got peaks and troughs, I suppose, in terms of how much I enjoy them. But you know, it's a bit too long. Some of the more indie or weird parts don't always land for me, but there are good parts to every song on the album.
Mhm. What did you rate it?
I've given it a 7 because I think, like I said, there are good parts to every song, and I think, I mean, you said you would go back to it, and I think
I
I will
would,
too.
I would,
Um,
but I do genuinely think it's because obviously there's a kind of alt rock experimental vibe to this album. I think probably made that pretty obvious by this point. And I was thinking, when it came to kind of rating the album, I had to think to myself, well, how do I consume the other kind of alt rock and experimental albums that I listen to? I don't tend to listen to them like whilst driving. I don't tend to listen to them like, say, if I'm on a train or a bus or whatever. I have them on in the background. You know what I mean? Like they're a soundtrack to whatever I'm doing that day or in that moment. And I just kind of like float in and out,
yeah.
And I think for that reason, I could see myself listening to this album quite a lot. So I've given it an 8.
Hmm.
I've given it an 8. I was tempted to even give it a 9 because, like I said, that there were times where I was just sitting writing my notes or I had it on the background. And I was like, "Fucking hell!" Like I just really got into the groove. But I mean, I think this will be a divisive album. You know what I mean? As I said, I think the guy's lyrics, Ollie Judge's lyrics, sorry, not well, lyrics and his delivery, vocal delivery, will turn off people immediately. So it's certainly not an album for the faint-hearted at all.
Yeah, I remember saying that about Broadcaster. It was one of the
Yeah,
same my criticisms about that song. I think I gave Black Midi an 8. So I think it's almost like, you know, you can you. I don't know why I've given that a slightly higher score than this. Just what I'm feeling at the time, I guess. But they are
they are
um,
very similar. I
quite
think
similar. Yeah,
very similar. Yeah, I mean, and I suppose we've both been pleasantly surprised by both bands.
yeah, that's fair to say. Okay, so that is Bright Green Field, the debut album from Squid.
Bright neon lights on the hillside. Snowy in February, the sweat drip off my plastic sheets. We're still tapping away to the global groove. unfinished. It's finished.